Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Caitlin Roper, Campaigns Manager for Collective Shout. And today I'm really excited to have a conversation with my colleague and friend, campaigner Lynn Kennedy. Lynn has been part of the campaign strategy team for 2 years now. Lynn, thanks so much for speaking with me today. We've been talking about this for ages and finally made it happen.
Good job. Yeah, thanks for having me, Caitlin. And my heart flutters when I hear you describe me as colleague and friend, truly, because what a privilege. And after fangirling for so many years, I just feel so privileged still today to hear that. Thank you.
Oh, you're so sweet, Lynn.
True.
So I thought we could start by just talking about how you came to be involved with Collective Shout. So tell me if you remember it differently, but this is my recollection of how it happened. So we came across Lynn on Twitter. We found you on Twitter and we saw that you were calling out companies that were objectifying and sexualizing women, and you were talking about corporate social responsibility and just talking. You were really just very switched on. So the team, we were all asking each other, like, who is this woman? She's great. We want to work with her. So because you live in Perth, where I also live, I was the one who got to go and meet you. So we went to a cafe and you brought me a Nutella brownie, which is I still remember this. And it was love at first sight, at least on my end.
Securing my employment future.
It worked. It totally worked. I was like, she's in. I'm going to report back to the others. We love her. She's great. She brought me a brownie. So yeah, I went back to the team and said how great you were. And actually, from memory, I think the brownie did actually come up. And the rest is history. So did I leave anything out, Lynn?
No, and that is such a good story. I love that story so much. Truth be told, though, it's actually a little bit deeper and longer than that. And I'm actually a longtime Collective Shout stalker. And I can date my Collective Shout interactions back to 2012, which is only a couple of years after Collective Shout even started. So I think for me, though, what I was doing, and I was probably in the same position as a lot of our supporters, in that I was cheering from the sidelines. I was watching on social media. I was reading your brilliant, insightful, articulate blogs and about your campaigns when they were published in mainstream media. I had signed a couple of petitions. I was aware that Collective Shout was doing this work, but then I think I hit a time in motherhood. My children had all started school and I was able to engage more directly. And that's how I ended up opening a Twitter account. And so I guess in the end, that is the ultimate truth. That's how you found me on Twitter. Yeah, that's no longer a silent stalker.
Well, if all our silent stalkers are like you, then that's fine with me.
Lynn, more brownies coming your way.
Great, let's go. Tell us about your background and how you came to be interested in this kind of work and these issues that Collective Shout tackles.
Yeah, being a woman, I think being a woman, living a lifetime filled with sexual harassment. That's a huge one. Dealing with objectification, being confronted by a pornified culture, which is just saturated by images and messages, which are constantly reinforcing the idea that you exist for men's sexual pleasure. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be. And just that being such an affront to me and my character and what I believe life is actually about. Being, I think becoming a mom caused me to look at it from another perspective again. And really challenged me to get active. I realized I could no longer just sit on the sidelines and watch. This is my children's future. This is the world they are going to grow up and wanting something better for them.
That's so great. And look at what you're doing now. Look at how you're changing the world through your campaigns at Collective Shout.
Again, the privilege is all mine. And I'm constantly reminded how, yes, we are this team. We're this small little team. We're the engine room of Collective Shout, but we're powered and fueled by what is a massive movement comprised of tens of thousands of people who are on board, who are backing us, who support us financially. And that does not escape me to remember that it isn't just me or us, but it is a huge movement accomplishing incredible things, incredible victories, huge victories against some of the biggest corporations in the world. And I don't think I'll ever get over that.
Well, speaking of some of the biggest corporations in the world, Lynn, you've been leading one of our campaigns against the sexual exploitation of girls on Instagram. Can you tell us a little bit about, well, just a little bit of background, like what you've come across on Instagram over the last few years and our campaign there?
Yes, well, it's been a 2-year investigation combined with a global joint campaign to wake up Instagram to the widespread, rampant predatory activity on the platform, the normalization of girls being sexualized, harassed, preyed upon. We've seen child exploitation material. We've seen that being traded, sold, exchanged, advertised, promoted. We've seen parents selling sexualized imagery of their own daughters, girls as young as 7, I've seen.
That's horrific.
I've witnessed, it is. We've seen naked men masturbating in girls' live posts on Instagram. One girl was 9 years old. So these are very confronting things. And this is a platform that's so normal. It's such a part of our everyday lives, and it has a nice veneer. Instagram has a nice veneer. It's where people go to share things about their families, their lives, recipes, things they're interested in, hobbies, sports, genuinely good things. And yet there's this part of Instagram that is used for sinister purposes by sinister men who are there for the express purpose of seeking out underage girls to prey upon. And so we've uncovered horrible things. And when we talk about this, our aim is not to scare anybody. But the reality is, these are scary things, and they are happening to real children. And I think it's important to remember that. And I think that when we talk about this, the purpose is to make people aware so that they can make good choices for themselves and their own families and their own children. Just to be aware that these are real risks and this is really happening. We saw the names of over 600 0 to 15-year-olds published on a pedophile forum. And these men would scrape the content from these girls' personal accounts on Instagram, repost it, reshare it onto this forum where a community of men would get together to look at these images and discuss the sexual abuse fantasies they had involving these girls. One of these children was not even 2 years old. And so these are stark reminders that there is a big demand by men for content which features teens and tweens, and they use it for nefarious purposes. So all of that is to say that we've uncovered horrible things happening on Instagram. And yet our campaign has enabled us to engage with Facebook at the executive level to ask for and secure changes which are bringing new safety measures for young people on the platform. And that is really exciting to see.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about some of the progress that that we have made on this campaign so far.
Well, some of the more recent safety measures that have been introduced on Instagram include the prevention of strangers direct messaging minors. And that was one of our direct campaign asks. We asked for that because what was happening is that underage girls were being targeted in their direct messages on Instagram by these predators, and they were being sent nude images, unsolicited, requests for nudes. And so obviously all of those things are inherently risky to underage girls. And that was one of the changes that Instagram came to the table to make to help improve safety for teens and underage girls on the platform. Just yesterday, Facebook made an announcement of some of the changes that they're making in the realm of age verification. Mm-hmm. This is a huge one because we know that up until recently, algorithms are actually driving predators, men who have a particular interest in little girls, driving them to connect with more little girls. And so it was evident that it's very important to disrupt that process. Well, how do you do that if you don't even know how old everybody who's on the platform is? And so there's been an announcement that they'll be rolling out new age verification measures in an attempt to tighten up that process, to verify the age of their users so that they can stop men connecting with underage girls, these suspicious adults who are there for the express purpose of finding these little girls and engaging with their content.
Well, that sounds like some great progress. So Lynn, thank you so much for all your work in this space. I know just over the last 2 years, you've really spearheaded this campaign, and you've done a lot of probably the really challenging work of going through it and finding this stuff and documenting it and reporting it back to Instagram. So I know that's really something that I guess would take a toll potentially. Let's turn now to everyone's favorite topic, ad standards. So as many of our supporters know, the current system of advertising self-regulation, where the ad industry regulates itself, we've written for a long time about how this is just not working. It's really a disaster. And one of the examples of the many failings of ad standards or ad industry regulation is sex shop Honey Birdette, who consistently use sexist and porn-themed advertising in shopping centers around the country. Now, it's hard to keep up because there's so many ads, but to date, Ad Standards has investigated complaints against more than 100 different Honey Birdette ads, and they've upheld roughly half of these. But nothing happens, nothing actually changes. So this is a pretty clear example of how industry self-regulation doesn't work, because you can have a sex shop consistently breaching the code of ethics, and they can be broadcasting porn-themed content to an all ages audience with zero consequences. So Lynn, you've been documenting these determinations by ad standards. So like I said, more than 100 different ads having to be investigated at all is huge. But I believe there have been complaints about even more Honey Birdette ads, and ad standards has refused to even consider them. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, what a frustrating process that even when you attempt to engage with this advertising complaints handling process, that your complaint is stopped at the gate and will not even be considered. So part of the process at Ad Standards end is to triage complaints. I've been told that they couldn't possibly review every complaint. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not my problem.
What are they doing then?
Well, the resources do not enable them to address every complaint. Well, we have a problem right there, because they are the sole body charged with the responsibility of ensuring that publicly displayed advertising meets community standards. If they don't have the resources to address and review complaints, well, then we have a big problem. So a number of my complaints, I've received a response. We have reviewed similar ads to this in the past, and they have, those complaints have been dismissed. Therefore, we will not be looking at this ad any further. Some of the ads that I've received this response for have been identical to other ads, essentially identical to other ads that the community panel upheld complaints against. And so we see this very arbitrary process, very inconsistent rulings, where in one instance, the ad, which is highly sexualized, objectifying of women, very porn inspired, complaints against those ads will be upheld. And in another instance, a virtually identical ad won't even be reviewed. Well, what sort of system is that? And what sort of confidence does that give community members to actually engage in it? The most recent ad that I complained about, and I hate using this term complaint, right? I'm
Like,
not
the problem is with you.
complaining.
Yeah, you're just
It
a
sounds like
complainer.
a binge, doesn't it? Yeah, like it's my fault. I've taken offense at something.
You just
Sounds like
problem with
something I could easily,
sexism.
I could easily get over that, complaint.
Mm.
It's not a complaint. It's actually, these are essentially sexual harassment claims. I object to the unwanted exposure to sexualized imagery in my local shopping center. I don't believe that as I go about conducting my business, that I should be forced to view that imagery. Same as in the workplace, where if I'm working, I have grounds to object to viewing that sort of imagery. The sexual harassment rules protect against that sort of exposure. So I hate even calling it a complaint. It's an objection to sexual harassment, essentially. But the most recent Honey Verdette ad that I complained about, where I received a consistently dismissed response saying, no, we won't review this. It was a side-by-side image of two women. One was standing sort of side on, but back view, and she was virtually naked from the waist down. Her entire backside was exposed, so she might have been wearing something, but it was not apparent because you could not see anything. And that is the sort of content that Ad Standards is not even reviewing complaints about. So that does not give me confidence at all that this is a good process, a good system, and that it genuinely does what it's supposed to do, and that is protect community members from harmful advertising.
And you think this has got to be in the benefit of Ad Standards. If they don't have to even investigate ads, then rather than saying, oh, we investigated, hundreds of Honey Verdette ads, they will make most of them in breach of the code of ethics. Like, that looks really bad for them when they say, oh, the system's working great, most of the time everyone complies with rulings and it's all fine. But if they have to actually go and investigate all these ads and uphold complaints and include this in their official stats, then it looks really bad for them. It's kind of like, yeah, this system is not working. Like, this is a failed system and it's completely ineffective. But if they can just kind of not even look at those complaints, then that's really convenient for their whole line. Oh, the system works great. because we're not even talking about them. We're not even including them.
Exactly. There is some really, really faulty data and suggestions drawn out of that data that Ad Standards draws from to justify its system, which it describes as best practice. And one of those pieces of data, it suggests that most of the time, most advertisers comply with the code of ethics, therefore self-regulation is good. So it's along those lines. But the system is supposed to deal with outliers. And so what their suggestion does, it says, oh, well, most of the advertisers comply most of the time, therefore it's working. So we don't need to look at the people, we don't even need to really think too much about the advertisers who don't comply. But that's the whole purpose of this system, is to deal with the outliers, to deal with the repeat offenders. So you cannot sideline data relating to the repeat offenders and say, oh, well, we won't really count them because they're not doing the right thing. The whole purpose of this complaints handling system is to deal with the ones who aren't doing the right thing and to rein them in. And it can't do that. So what good is that system?
That's a really good point, Lynn. And the other thing is, even if they're saying, most of the time, most of the advertisers comply, what does that mean? They comply with the rulings. So, there's been a breach to the code of ethics and then they comply. Okay, well, now that 2 months later, now that there's been a ruling against us, we will now remove the ad. Actually, we've already removed it because we've moved on to the next thing. Like like if that's what compliance involves, no one has to actually change anything. So the idea that most advertisers do comply with rulings, well, that doesn't have any impact on the advertisers. There's no penalties for them or anything anyway. So that's like a really low bar. It's not saying that no one breaches the code of ethics. It's just saying after they've breached the code of ethics and we say, oh, you should, take that down. They're like, yeah, I did that last month. So how is that like evidence of success anyway?
Exactly. And it begs the question, where would we be without ad standards? Like, would we be any better, any worse off?
Right where we are now?
How could we be?
Yeah.
What is the point? And this is the other thing I have thought about. If most advertisers are doing the right thing most of the time, why are they all contributing to a system which essentially only deals with 2 or 3 repeat offenders? Why are they essentially propping up this system which can't even address repeat offenders, can't rein them in? It seems like their money might be better directed somewhere else, because it's certainly not going to a system which accomplishes what it's meant to.
That's right. And it's also so burdensome on members of the community, I think. First of all, having to make the complaints in the first place because there is no pre-vetting. So how it works, for anyone who doesn't actually know, when you see something that is sexist, porn inspired, sexually objectifying, something that you think might be in breach of the code, you have to go let ad standards know. Like they've already just allowed it, that's the system. Advertisers can just advertise, and only if someone says, hey, I think that might be in breach, is anything investigated in the first place. So, but now there's one of the more recent developments. Ad Standards has said that if members of the public making complaints over porn inspired and sexist advertising don't supply a photo with their complaint, then Ad Standards may not be able to consider complaints. So again, this is just yet another burden on members of the community, another thing that might dissuade them from making a complaint because, I didn't have time to get a photo of it. So it's one more thing where Ad Standards is just not doing its job. It's just fobbing it off to everyday people. You go do the work, you go get the evidence, you make the complaint, and then we'll see. So Lynn, I wanted to ask you as well about an experience you had recently at Lend-Lease Lakeside Joondalup Shopping Centre, where you tried to get footage of a video playing on a loop outside Honey Burdette to accompany your complaint to Ad Standards. Can you tell us what happened there?
Isn't that a nice experience for me? Here I am attempting in my own community to engage with the complaints handling process. So I'm at Lakeside. I see these very porn-inspired ads. These were not just still images. It was still images intermixed with these slow motion porn-style videos on display in Honey Birdette windows on digital screens. So there's two windows either side of the shop entrance, and these videos are running on loop on these screens. So I stopped, knowing that Ad Standards now has this requirement of being supplied with videos or images of the ad that you're submitting the complaint about. And so I stopped to capture the ads. I stopped and I switched my phone camera on and started filming. And within a couple of seconds, I was approached by a security guard who asked me what I was doing. And when I told him, he told me there is no filming allowed in the shopping center, and I needed to delete the footage. And I explained to him again, I don't believe that these ads are suitable for display in my community. I am submitting a complaint to Ad Standards about these. I have to send them evidence of the ad. And he insisted that I would not be allowed to leave the center, and I would not actually even be allowed to leave his presence until he had seen that I had deleted the footage. And I told him, I asked, because obviously, you know, when you're approached by a security guard in a shopping center, that's very confronting. It's a very hostile situation. He was obviously, there was that power imbalance there where he's dressed in uniform. He has a position of authority in that situation, or at least that's his intention, is to give off that impression. And so it was hostile, and I was conscious that I did not want this to escalate. This is my community. I want to be able to get along with people in my community, and it was drawing a lot of attention. I had a lot of people stop and look, and they were trying to listen in. I'm standing outside a sex shop filming, and it was drawing a lot of negative attention, which I didn't want. And so I asked, would he mind if I phoned center management to get permission so that I could film this for Ad Standards? And so I did that. Center management would not give me permission at that time. And so to avoid escalating the situation, to avoid causing any more of a scene than it was already becoming, I complied and I appeared to delete it from my phone. So that's all to say that even when you attempt to engage with the processes that are there, that are supposed to help us, when you try to engage with the people who are in positions of power to help us change this, they don't help. And not only do they not help, but they actually put more roadblocks to make redressing this already bad situation even worse.
That's an awful thing to happen, Lynn. I'm really sorry to hear about that. I mean, I obviously know about that, but just hearing about it again in detail, it's terrible and must have been incredibly intimidating. My experiences with the same shopping center, Lend-Lease, Lakeside Joondalup. I first called Lakeside Joondalup back in 2017 to make a complaint about Honey Birdette porn-themed advertising, and I was told I'd receive a call back. And I'm literally still waiting for a call back. I have called back a number of times since then. I've gone in person to center management, and every time it's the same thing. Oh, they're all in a meeting, nobody's available, someone will call you back. So they don't care. Like, they know this is happening. They don't care that children are being exposed to pornified content in their shopping center. They don't care that women, survivors of sexual violence, are being forced to see, sexualized depictions of women of choking. They don't care about all of this stuff, or even something we've learned about recently, some of the stories from young Honey Birdette employees about sexual harassment, abuse, stalking, even sexual assaults taking place within the store. It's absolutely disgraceful. They know about all of this stuff, and they're just for years continue to just fob us off. So it's clear that they don't really have any good intentions of acting in the interests of women and children.
Oh, I don't know, Caitlin. 4 years. Aren't you being a little bit demanding and impatient? It's only been 4 years.
Yeah, that was before the
It's
Me
another 4.
That's right.
You've just reminded me that I have a quote, because we talk at Collective Shout, we talk about corporate social responsibility. We talk about being good corporate citizens. And it seems like such a small ask, doesn't it, to ask corporates to consider the impact of their activities on women and children. Like you just said, survivors of sex trafficking, survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence. It doesn't seem a big ask, does it? And I've got what has become my favorite corporate social responsibility statement, and I want to share that with you. Let me just read it out to you. Sorry, scrolling. All right. Companies must start justifying their worth to society with greater emphasis placed on environmental and social impact rather than straight economics. Now, what does that mean? It means that companies can no longer just say profit at all and any cost. It is corporate's responsibility to consider how their activities are impacting the communities that they operate in. You will laugh when I tell you who said this statement. It was said in 1973 by a man called Dick Dusseldorp. Who was Dick Dusseldorp? He's the founder of Lend-Lease.
Wow.
The same company that operates our local shopping center, leases to what is now Playboy, global porn empire brand, Playboy-owned sex shop, Honey Birdette, advertising using objectifying pornified portrayals of women in their shop windows. So I think it's time for Lend-Lease to revisit those statements made by their own founder and reconsider some of their corporate activities and how they are contributing to the harm of women and girls in my community. It's funny, isn't it? Did you ask for Honey Birdette to come into your local community?
Not that I recall.
I didn't ask for them to come in. Did you ask for Honey Birdette to be able to display their pornified ads to you and your children in your community? I didn't ask them. No, but Lend-Lease has invited them into our communities. At the same time, they invite our children to come and see Santa and come and take part in school holiday activities. Santa at our local Lend-Lease owned shopping center is set up literally meters away from the Honey Birdette shop front.
I was going to say it's about 20 meters away or something. Yeah,
it is a very short distance, and literally thousands of children would pass the sex store to get to see Santa.
And even school holiday activities. I think both you and I have been, can't remember if it was with our kids or just us, different activities where you would go and you're supposed to take out your phone and there's an app and you can see different rainbow designs around the place if you do it in the right place. One of them was really close to Honey Birdette, but that even goes to show they're happy for you to take photos and film. They encourage it under certain circumstances, but when you're going to use it to make a complaint to add standards, we don't do that, it's not allowed.
That's right, exactly. It was directly outside the Honey Birdette store, one of those school holiday installations that was set up particularly for kids to take part in. So there's a lot of display of inability or just not taking responsibility, not showing any care or concern for women and children in the community.
Lynn, we've also called out, in conjunction with all of this, the Male Champions of Change, who have recently rebranded as the Champions of Change Coalition. I was wondering if you could just explain, maybe for our newer supporters, just the connection there. So how Champions of Change are involved with this issue.
Yeah, interesting connection. Champions of Change Coalition established as a way of drawing corporates into that realm of promoting women, supporting women. They have a claim of stepping up beside women, eliminating gender inequalities in their own organizations and in the wider community. And so the Champions of Change Coalition is divided into different arms. So there's a sports division, there's a tech division, and then there's this property group, Champions of Change. And these are the CEOs and chairs of the property companies of the biggest, property companies in the country. The same owners of the shopping centers which lease to Honey Birdette and facilitate and allow the display of these ads in our communities. And so our challenge has been, if you are going to say that you step up beside women, you care about women, you care about the promoting gender equality, well, it takes more than adding women executives or women members to your board. Those are great things. Of course, do those things, but consider the wider impact of your business activities and how you are affecting the people on the ground. Essentially, you and me and our daughters. And it's going to take more than box ticking, because when your corporate activities manifest as my children being exposed to Honey Birdette's porn-themed advertisements in our local community, I don't want to hear about your power and influence and the great things that you are doing for women, because the fact is you're causing harm to the people, the women, the girls who I care about the most, and expect to be called out for double standards, for hypocrisy. And we'll keep doing that until something changes.
And I think no one can claim ignorance anymore on all of these things. The research documenting the harms from sexualization to children, this is well established. Decades of research on the harms of objectification of women and the links to men's violence against women. Like, this is not contested. This is well documented, decades of research literature, and a lot of it that we've also shared with these different bodies as well. So they can't say they didn't know. They're just choosing to profit. They're choosing profits over the well-being of women and girls.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the amazing thing about Collective Shout. I love this about Collective Shout. We're not plucking claims out of thin air, like some people we know about empowering women. There is data to show that these activities are connected to real life harms. And Collective Shout does such a great job articulating those arguments, pointing to the evidence, pointing to the academic research which underpins our claims. And you are right. These corporations have no excuse for enabling that behavior, which contributes to the harm of women and girls.
Lynn, you've also been in contact with ethical super companies over this. How can you explain how they are connected to this issue as well?
Yes, well, interesting one, because in a way, we all end up complicit and we all end up aiding these activities. And we do it through our super funds, because our super funds, these investment companies, are frequently invested in these property companies posting Honey Birdette, which facilitate the display of these ads. So in a way, we inadvertently get drawn into and become complicit in helping this activity. And there's a really easy action call for our supporters on this, and that is to contact your super fund and find out exactly what's in your portfolio. Which companies are you invested in? Whose activities are you essentially propping up and profiting from? And what can you do? What action can you do to hold your super fund accountable, to say, well, I don't want my money going to these unethical corporations which harm women and girls. And yeah, that's a challenge for us to engage and do what we can to stop aiding and profiting from these activities. So I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn which of these companies they're actually invested in themselves. So everyone needs to do a little super fund checkup and find out, and consider changing funds, consider looking for an option where these corporates are screened out.
That's great advice. Thanks, Lynn. I was wondering if you have a favorite campaign or campaign victory, or just a memory of the team that you'd like to share with us, just something a bit nicer than all this other yuck stuff we've been talking about.
Well, of course, it's when we were sitting around in a Brisbane hotel looking through barely legal porn and eating chocolate. Of course.
Can you a little bit of context to that, maybe? Elaborate on what was going on.
We were just about to go out against Bauer Media, who had a 70-year history of publishing people and picture magazines, which had horrific content, traded off the idea and demand for this just barely legal kind of pornography. And we trolled through this horrific content essentially to arm ourselves with the ability of approaching Bauer Media and say, what are you going to do about this? And the chocolate part, that doesn't need context, does it?
Well, it's always just nice to be together, isn't it? Those rare times where we get to all be together in the same room, because we are all around the country. But I think that's probably the last time we've done it. It was 2019, wasn't it? And since then, we've had a couple of opportunities lined up that, because of COVID, have all fallen away. So that was back when we did things and wore clothes that weren't just pajamas and all of that. Yeah, I really like that too, because that was a time where we went through all this horrible content, and then we started sharing it. We started tweeting it and tagging Bauer Media and saying, can you actually defend this content? This is content sexualizing teen girls, really horrible content, referring to girls as fresh young flesh, and pornographic kind of, it was really awful content that we had found. But within a very short time, I think we were still sitting at the table, and we had either a message or a phone call from the CEO of Bauer Media requesting to meet with us. So that was quite one of those quick sort of wins in that sense, which was really satisfying, because as a result, they did pull those magazines completely. Lynn, what would you like to see us achieve in the next 10 years? Where would you like us to be in 10 years?
Yeah, I would like to see some of our sideline stalkers getting up and getting involved and getting their hands dirty and really getting engaged with our content, with our campaigns. Community action, community-driven action is really powerful. We saw that recently with a supporter who led a boycott of shopping centers which host Honey Birdette. And we just saw the power that goes with that local action, people rallying up, support from the people in their own communities to participate in some of these campaigns. That really excites me. I'd love to see more of that. I think everybody playing their part. And what I love the idea is that there is no action too big or too small that a Collective Shout supporter can take. And we even see, just from liking our posts, you drive up our engagement and you help spread the message about our campaigns and the things that we're fighting against. I love the idea of more young people getting involved, that this would become an issue important to them, and that we would see them leading the charge on some of these campaigns and issues, that we would see them engaging their politicians to say, no, we don't want to grow up, we don't want to live in a world where women are abused and disrespected and silenced and exploited. We want better than that. And then more corporate engagement. Sometimes I think about Collective Shout and I think, gosh, here we are, like, these are the biggest, richest, most powerful, most well-resourced companies in the world, and we're essentially performing due diligence for them. We're pointing out that they're engaged in these activities. They're selling the worst child sex abuse material we've ever come across. How is it that we, little old us, little young, you know what I'm saying,
a handful of women,
we can see this happening, but they don't, or they don't care to? And if they don't, why not? And if they don't, they better start, because these are real issues that impact us and shape our society. And I want to see more corporations at their core incorporating that value of being against sexual exploitation, of refusing to profit from sexual exploitation, from child sex abuse material, for that to be so entrenched in their corporate values that we're not required to do their due diligence for them, that we're not required to screen their platforms for activity and products and services which exploit women and girls. That's what I'd like to see.
Lynn, you're such a wonderful addition to the team, and we're so very glad that we found you. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing all your wisdom and your insights. So thank you from all of us, and thank you everyone else for tuning in.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.